bear.
You're pro bear?
Yeah, I'm pro bear.
Have you done anything to help the bear community? Whether that means you take that to mean whatever you want.
Depends. I don't know. There may be more than one bear community, but
There are more than one bear community. You know, the physical bears, like the animals, are quite racist. Are you familiar with this amongst each other?
Yeah, they're like theft.
Yeah, like the black bears really don't like the brown bears, and the brown bears and the white bears don't like each other. It's very it's analogous to humanity in many respects. Like the polar bears, they live on their own. It's sequestered in the north. The black bears live down south, and then the brown bears sort of live out west, eating tacos or whatever they're doing.
I don't know if you see behind me there, but there's actually a bear on my desk.
Oh yeah, bear with the word gravy written on it. And it looks like a mallet and a tuning fork.
Oh yeah, giant tuning fork.
What is that? Is that 440 hertz?
This is not 440 hertz. This is 384.
Is that a special number?
It's a G note.
Is it like a pure G note in the what's the one that's like real and not the one that's like the equal temperament?
Right. It's 432. If A was 432, a G could be 384.
Right. Okay. So tell me about, so I guess you're in the Owen Benjamin at large circle. Is that correct?
I consider myself friends with the big bear. I listen to his streams a lot.
Yeah, because you have a bear with gravy on it, and that tends to. My bear is not related. It just is a bear, but it could be. I'm not. I am fine with Owen. I'm not in a war with Owen. I never log on to his streams because I know I have my own self-awareness enough to know that if I were to be in the chat room, I would get myself banned for life. I've listened to it because I'd say, "What are you talking about? Oh, and this is crazy. That's dumb." And he'd go, "You're banned." So I don't even bother. I respect the boundary, but no, I would cross it. So I just stay, because I would want to be too friendly too quickly.
Know your limits.
I know the limits. So you're this is everyone Mystical American Patriots Society. Have you heard of our podcast before?
Not that you guys invited me, but I'm looking forward to it. It sounded like a lot of whimsical fun.
Yeah, it is. We've had a long history of 3-ish years in which one co-host sadly died. I had to kill him on air. That was sad. I got a new co-host in. He was started as a clone of the previous one, but he's since developed his own personality. And we have been. This show was sort of started as trying to find. I don't know why it started. We just had a lot to talk about, I suppose. The world seemed insane, and we tried to make sense of it. I think we did we had a good run at trying to do that. And I think you sort of came from a similar place, trying to make sense of the world that seemed insane. So you started a show. Is that accurate?
Well, the making sense of the insanity kind of came later. My initial goal was to just capture that flow state that comes about whenever two people are conversing honestly about their passion endeavors.
Mm-hmm.
And, the idea was everybody everywhere knows something or has had some epiphany, probably multiple, that nobody else has ever thought in human history or realized it ever at any point. So I wanted to get that. But of course, in the process, you learn things, you develop curiosities. I kind of started off as more like a trippy festival kid. And now I'm more into linguistics and energy healing and mythology, symbolism.
So you were like a sort of a, maybe not Burning Man per se, but Burning Man adjacent sort of guy.
Too poor for Burning Man.
Too poor, yeah. But you would have, if you had the money.
I don't know, man. I don't know if I want to go die in a desert.
Yeah, the cheapest. A lot of people don't know this. The cheapest version of Burning Man you can go to in festival culture is actually the Talladega Speedway during the race day. Because the people go there and you think it's about racing, but it's just basically a redneck orgy. If you've ever if you've ever been to a NASCAR race, and the biggest one is the Talladega, and they go out there and it's just tense country music and people dying in tents from overdoses and orgies. It's
Wow.
just it's
So
it,
every subculture has their own version, sounds like.
every subculture has their own version. You can have Fire Island, you can have Talladega, you can have Burning Man, you
Renaissance
can have
fairs,
Renaissance fairs,
they get
you can
freaky, I
have
hear.
Gathering of the Juggalos. Any one you want. Every subculture has their version of the orgy in the field.
Well, since we were talking about the bear community around Owen Benjamin, I was at their festival in September and I didn't even catch a whiff of butthole smell or sex or orgies or anything. Everybody was sober and it
Yeah.
was actually more fun.
Yeah, I've never been a substance person. I don't even claim that as like a superiority thing. I just have never liked them. Like I don't understand how anyone ever got hooked on pain pills. The few times I've taken pain pills,
Yeah.
I would rather be in pain than whatever this is doing to me. I don't understand how the appeal. But some people
I
really like
in
it.
high school, I had to get surgery on a knee injury when I was a 17-year-old, and they gave me these like opioids or whatever. I think it was, I don't know, the one that starts with a C. And I took one of them and then I
Mhm.
was like, I could make $20 a pill selling these to my schoolmates. So I just did
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
It's way more
Yeah.
worth it.
Right. I've never enjoyed any of that. I didn't, it's not that I was against alcohol. I just didn't like the taste of it enough to push through to the enjoyment of the inebriation. I was like, this tastes awful. Never
Well, the thing
enjoyed any
about
of
it
it.
is like the more intoxicated you are, the closer you are to death.
Yeah, exactly. Which I think that's there's a little bit in substance abuse, which is it's like a testing the waters of suicide. That's sort of what like, people are like, maybe it'll kill me this time. Maybe if I have some sleeping pills and I won't wake up. And people just sort of like, they're not willing to commit because doing suicide is really, you got to commit. A lot of
Yeah,
people are
they
scared of that.
prefer less permanent forms of self-destruction. You notice that
Yes,
with
yes.
addict people, even if they're not currently addicted to the terrible thing, that they will just eventually spiral and self-destruct in some other way, like socially.
Yeah.
Because I don't know, there's like that. I consider life to be kind of like a infinite game of chutes and ladders, where you're
Hmm.
either climbing the ladder or wee down the slide, and then some people just can't get off the slide.
They can't. Yeah, I've said before. I think the most accurate game for the analogy to life is probably Super Mario Party because you can be like 5 stars ahead, and then the game will just give the other person the win somehow. And you get 7 stars for being the worst. You win.
Oh yeah, Mario
Nintendo's
Kart's
great
like
about
that
that.
too. You're in first
Yeah,
place, you're crushing, and then blue shell, blue
yeah.
shell.
Mario Kart is like, oh, here's a blue shell. If you get penalized for doing it's really Mario Kart may be the impetus of socialism among America's youth because you get punished for doing better and
Yeah,
you
the
get
game is
goods for
most
doing
fun
bad.
when you're mediocre or even bad. You get the best items.
Yeah, exactly. But if you excel at it, you get coins and you get hit with a blue shell every 30 seconds. It's a terrible. I mean, it's still fun somehow, but it's a terrible little mechanic. But I guess
We
without it, people would just speed away forever. You'd have runaway capitalism. That's the message.
well, we've sorted that out.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so tell me you're an epiphany guy. What is your absolute strangest belief?
Everything's gonna be fine. It's already great.
Well, that's true. But like okay, the one that's hardest to articulate and make people understand.
Oh man, you gotta like warm me up first.
No, no, no. It's just like lions don't need a warm up before they sprint after a gazelle. They just go,
Okay,
right?
the strangest epiphany to or
The
hardest to
strangest
describe.
thing that you believe that's hardest to articulate to other people.
Shoot. Well, it could be the idea that we're all one consciousness experiencing itself subjectively through infinite perspectives.
Yes. Okay. That's a pretty good one. I've heard that one before. That's a very sort of Vedic philosophy sort of idea, New Agey sort of idea. Um, I can swing with that.
But it is experienceable.
Right. It's experience. We're all one consciousness because we can all say I am, which is what God says. I am. You all say I. I. There's only one I. There's only one everything, as the song says.
Everything is everything. That's one of my
Every,
favorite epiphanies too.
everything is everything. Did you get some of your epiphanies on psychedelic substances? Are these just meditation? Are they life experiences?
Oh, a healthy mix of all three.
Yeah. Yeah. What have you do you still do psychedelics to this day, or is that something from your past, or
God, no.
it
I like
was
my
good?
life now. So, like, why would I want to open the interdimensional portal and pull out a different version of myself when this one's going so well?
Yeah, yeah, it does. There's a trend. Even Terrence McKenna, he was a bit of a fraud in his later years because he would talk about this stuff, but he's sort of stopped taking anything as he got older because, and he addressed this a few times in his, I guess you call them lectures. He said, well, you climb Mount Everest, you don't just keep climbing it over and over again. You sort of reflect on what happened. You don't need to do it ad infinitum. He said, but I do feel a bit like I'm a fraudster because I'm coming out here and I haven't taken DMT in 30 years or whatever. Because it was just too much. He said, if at some point you have to stop. Um, and I think that's probably correct. Like maybe you need to do it once. I don't know if you need to do it, but if you're going to do it, maybe do it a few times. And
Well, yeah,
then,
they begin to suggest their own disuse at a point, and then if you just keep going, chasing the dragon,
yeah,
eh, you melt.
that is the thing that the psychedelics are different from the other drugs in that they sort of tell you to stop doing it after a while is what people report. Like just, hey, if you do more, you're going to be worse off, you know. And there's sort of like a natural endpoint to that drug lifestyle that there isn't
Yeah,
with, say,
I just
uh,
had a
cocaine.
conversation with my friend Hakan. He's a psychedelic visionary artist out of Turkey,
Hmm.
and he shared this incredible story where so he's had like a up and down in and out relationship with psychedelics for his whole life and career pretty much, but he was using this like analog ketamine research chemical that was
Uh-huh.
legal at the time, as these
Yep.
research chemicals often are, because yeah, the way the law works, they're made illegal molecularly. So if you invent something new, but it still has an effect, you can get away with it for a while.
You
And
change one little thing on the end of the polymer chain, and it's a new drug, and now it's legal. It's slightly different. Yeah.
yeah, so he's having these like crazy instant manifestation type experiences, thoughts become reality right away, full on like temporary God mode type thing. But he kept pushing it, kept taking more, kept going into the hole, the K hole. And I think one of the reasons why you can't just keep doing this stuff is because there's no free lunch in nature. And if you're taking in that type of like it's an energy thing, you're getting so much energy out of this substance, burning it like a fuel, but it's more as if you're taking a loan out, and eventually you have to the bill comes due with interest. And he found himself in prison in a maximum security Turkey facility for stuff that he didn't actually do, but it looked like it was his fault. And that was his dark night of the soul, the bill coming due. But the reason I'm talking about it is because it's one of my favorite episodes I've ever had. In the talk that or the story that he told about it, and being in prison and getting dream guides coming to him and showing him how to do tantra to self-liberate from his darkness and imprisonment, that he has this enlightenment experience, this opening, finds the eternal presence, and next day he's like released from prison, just dropped, never, because it showed our external world is really just response to our internal world that, if you're if you're spiritually in prison, you'll find yourself restricted or even imprisoned externally, but that can shift just as quickly as you get yourself out of it.
Yeah, like that's even, like in the Bible, Paul's in prison, and then but he's so spiritually liberated that the doors just fling open and he's able to escape. But to prevent the jailer from killing himself from losing the prisoner, he stays. But like it was sort of like the same idea, like he's so spiritually free that it had to be physically free. And by the same token, if you get spiritually in bondage to something like a drug or whatever, you eventually end up often in physical bondage. And so the two go tightly together.
Yeah,
I've
and
seen
that
that.
that
I've seen that many times.
I think that description is a good way to understand how meditation and practices like that can actually liberate you from time, because it
Mm,
seems counterintuitive. Most people, and myself included, unless they and I have a good practice or a perfect practice, but I also don't feel super restricted by time in my life. But a lot of people are like, I can't do that because I don't have time for it. I can't take 10 minutes or 20 or 30 minutes out of my day to sit and do nothing but be internal and breathe. But
right.
that experience of giving yourself space where there's no requirement, nothing has to be a certain way, there's no pressure. You're going into your internal world and expanding it with each breath. That time is super subjective. And we all know that innately, but we don't really have a way to describe it within the confines of time as we share in our consensus reality. But I think that when you give yourself that space internally, you actually find yourself having more time in the day. Like the experience of time is less restricted. You find yourself getting more done, even though you spent the 20 or 30 minutes as if you had an extra hour or two in the day. It's very hard to articulate because it doesn't add up mathematically, but I think that it's
Hmm.
true.
Yeah, well, I think part of that is like a lot of your busyness is well, a lot of most people's busyness is illusory, and they think that they're more busy than they are. And so if you have this thing like if I stop for 30 minutes, everything will fall apart, and it's not true. And when you give yourself that space and you learn like, oh, that isn't true. I have more time than I think. You get less stress about the world and your life and the environment, and you start to chill out. And then you have more. I don't know if you have more time, but it certainly you seem you're aware of the time you have more, for sure.
You're freed from time as a
Yeah,
bondage. It becomes more of a resource rather than a limitation, something like that.
yeah. It's something. It's definitely something like that, which is the primary. Like even if you're not going to meditate, just like spend 30 minutes doing something you like to do. Like it's a hobby. Just take time to be like, I don't have to do something right now, productive, quote unquote. I can just be over here, whatever it is, drawing, playing music, something. And
Yeah,
the
that's
world
why when
will,
someone tells me, "Oh, you're busy, so I didn't invite you to this," I'm just like, "How dare you? I am not busy. I refuse
right.
to. I would do not accept that label."
I refuse to accept busy. And people used to say that all the time in grad school. Like, I'm so busy, I'm so busy. And I had this one professor that would just go, everyone is busy. It doesn't matter. Like, what? So who cares? And he would just throw that down every time. It was never an excuse, but it sort of becomes an excuse to not do things it becomes an excuse to really not live your busyness. Like you have to, you get programmed with this whole schedule of like, I have to do this, and this. And it sucks all the, you might call the spirit out of things, the ability to like freely just like, hey, let's go do this, like live in the moment.
Yeah, you're accepting slave consciousness whenever you're like, "I'm too busy for this or that." You'll find a way if you just drop that particular belief. It will help a lot. In fact, one of the things that is so meaningful for me in life is how I've been able to learn about the belief systems that we hold and especially about ourselves, and how limiting beliefs literally limit our vitality, our actual energy to do things.
Oh yeah, like if you think you can't, I don't like if you think you can't do some sort of exercise, for example, because your knees are bad or your back or something, and then you don't do it, and then then your body continues to get worse. Whereas if you say, I think I can, then you go out there and maybe it hurts for a minute, but then you get better at it. And so it really does like control the outcome of your life in a very practical way that's easy to see. But I think what you're talking about, it does that even beyond that sort of practical level. It can dictate how your life goes. You're sort
It
of,
does. Yeah.
yeah,
So, and the incredible thing is that like if it's your knee or your ankle or your hip or whatever part of the body it is, that there's no injury or dis-ease that is just a random thing happening to you or your body having a problem. It's always a message from your body about where your belief systems are in conflict with your potential.
mm.
So, for example, you're very familiar with the chakras as a conceptualization.
I am. I couldn't name all of 7 of them. If you put a, I might if you could put a gun to my head, but other than a gun to my head, I don't think I would get. Okay, crown, sacral, root, heart, the one in the middle there, and then the other one.
I'll only shoot you in the leg.
Okay, I passed a little bit.
So, but the root chakra, it is our groundedness in a way. It's like the furnace of our body where our energy is welling up from,
It's like in your tailbone, isn't it? When it's
Yeah, yeah. It's the very bottom, like where your legs are connecting to your hips. So it's kind of
Yeah.
that whole region of like, and there's some overlap. It's not that's why I
Right.
call it a conceptual system. I don't mean it's literal, but our root as the energy generation system that it is. The sacral has something to do with energy generation too, but one of the types of beliefs that can get hung up in the root is back to the whole busy idea,
Mm-hmm.
that if you're the type of person who is always like going over your to-do list in your head and thinking about all the stuff that you need to get done today or else you suck, right?
Yep. Yep. I
And
know many people like this.
yeah. Well, it's why we have so many hip replacements in the Western world, is because people are really caught up in this. It's like the whole no pain, no gain mentality, where like the most common thing in people's root chakra is this idea that if I'm not working myself to the point of burnout and misery, then I'm not enough productive enough. And if that type of belief is in you, even at an unconscious level, and you're torturing yourself with your to-do list and never feeling good enough, one of the things that the body will do to mirror that belief is you'll have trouble getting a good night's sleep, maybe even to the point of insomnia. You might just wake up earlier than you would want to for being fully rested and find you can't go back to sleep, that type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So it's your body is basically creating the circumstances where you feel worn down and burned out perpetually so that you can fulfill that belief of like, well, if I'm feeling raggedy, then I must be trying hard enough. And you'll just get stuck in that as like a negative feedback loop.
Yeah, or like sciatica. I think it manifests sometimes in like sciatica or like we were saying, hip pain, maybe knee pain. Because the Western world does have like so much of that, and like hip replacements, knee replacement, and they also the highest level of physical inactivity. Like it doesn't really go together.
Right.
That if it was just a physical thing, like it wouldn't. Those things wouldn't. There's no reason so many people's hips should be worn out. So many people are not like, I don't know, doing gymnastics. You know, they're sitting at their desk and your hip should be pretty fine. You might get overweight sitting at your desk all day. Heart problems make more sense. But like hip people just can't move. They can't sit up. They get back trouble. And it's really interesting to think of it from that perspective. Like this is a psycho emotional problem primarily. And it won't be fixed until you step back from fix whatever that is.
Yeah. Address the belief systems that are perpetuating the issue,
Right.
because
And that doesn't mean there isn't, like if you took an MRI, it doesn't mean you wouldn't find some problem.
oh,
I
sure.
think
But
it
what's amazing is
manifests.
the
Yeah.
structural problem can resolve itself way quicker than people realize.
Oh yeah.
I tell this story a lot, but it's one of my favorites from working with clients doing biofield tuning, where I was working with this guy. I think he was like 65 or something, and he had leg length discrepancy of about 6 inches.
Uh-huh.
So that's how
I know a
far
guy
out
like
of.
this. I call him. I only remember his name's Joey because I don't remember anybody's name, but he has to hop a little bit like a kangaroo. And so I say, oh, I only remember people's name if they have a disability that I can associate with their name. That's the only way I've ever been able to do it.
It's a good way
But
to
yeah,
do it.
Joey the Hopper, the kangaroo.
Well, I did a tuning for this guy, and we figured out the type of beliefs that were causing that root imbalance. And I believe it's been a long time, but I believe it has something to do with what we've been talking about now, the to-do list and the no pain, no gain type of mentality. And he went to his chiro 3 days later, and the guy that he was seeing was like, "What did you do? Your legs are the same length."
Yeah.
And it was just working on the energy mental side, and the physical thing resolved itself pretty much right away. And I see stuff like that very common with energy work. That's what makes it such an effective modality, because you're really addressing the root cause rather than just symptoms.
So is this something you can charge for? Because I need other things in my life I can charge for that don't require like a medical license.
I totally charge for it.
Excellent. You have to teach me how to do this so that I can go around. I've always wanted, I've never achieved to specialize in things that may or may be adjacent to medicine but don't require a license or any sort of regulatory oversight. That's always been like my dream, is to have like 5 or 6 of those. I've never succeeded at doing it. I met a lady one time. She was like, "I'll teach you Reiki." And I was like, "That'd be cool." And then she was like, "Here's a horse. And if you put your hands over the horse, you can." I was like, I don't know what's happening. She wanted to do like horse Reiki. And I wasn't prepared to jump from nothing into horses. And so it was just a bit much for me. But if all I need is a tuning fork and something, then then I need to learn how to do this skill also. Because
Well, it sounds like
I
she
do
got it
think it works.
backwards.
Like I wouldn't just be being a there are people in this space that are just taking your money in shysters.
Oh, for
I wouldn't
sure.
be doing that because I believe it would actually work, but you know, still I'd be like halfway shyster, halfway real.
Well, I think she just was backwards. And really, you don't want to do Reiki on the horse starting out. You want the horse to do Reiki on you. They're very good at it.
Here's the thing. Do you know she actually used that exact sentence? You don't want and then I said, I think I can't.
I'm out.
I don't know how to use She used that exact sentence. She said, you don't want she said, the way this works is you don't want to do Reiki on the horse. You want the horse to do Reiki on you. And I said, I don't I don't know if I can. I'm not that
I don't know
level.
this horse.
I said, I'm not that level. I'm not that level. And then she told me about some crystals. And then I commented on her dream catcher collection. And then I went home. And, so, that was my only foray into learning energy healing.
Well,
But
Reiki was like a foot in the door for me to what I do now. But
really, I mean, I think it is, there is something to it for sure. Cause I've known people that have had really good results with it, but I've also never been able to get into it myself.
well, for me, it was just a byproduct of being the trippy festival kid that I was.
Hmm.
I was like a rave shaman walking around with big crystal wands. And when somebody was starting to get a tummy ache from their drugs, I could lay hands on them and they would feel better, and or wave
Yeah.
crystals around their head and their headache would go away, that type of thing. So that was my entry point to know that there was something to it, but still kind of just treating symptoms in that realm. I wouldn't say that's the case for everyone who practices Reiki. I'm sure there's really, really adept, highly psychic practitioners out there. But for me, it wasn't something I got like attuned to or certified in. It was, I could just kind of feel the vibe and I went with that. But, like in terms of you picking up tuning forks and learning how to do it, it's not that it's actually not that huge of a learning curve, in my opinion. I had a client yesterday, a listener of my show, who we were starting the session and he told me he had gotten himself a tuning fork or a few forks and he was at the skateboard park, and he met a random person there who was having trouble with pain in their ankle from some old injury that they had received like 12 years prior. And this guy who was my client, he hadn't done much with forks yet. You know, he was just kind of picking them up and practicing and messing around. But he said he used a tuning fork on this guy's ankle for 15 minutes. And the next time he saw him 3 days later, he was like, my ankle is better. Doesn't hurt anymore. It's like fixed. So that's very possible. It's very possible. But then there's like the deeper level of the practice where you learn the language of the anatomy of your energy field. The human energy field has a specific anatomy, just like your organ system and the way your body's laid out. And there can be some variation a little bit from person to person, of course. What stuck energy in one region means for one person might be a different interpretation for another person, but it's always like thematically similar. And the chakra system is a very good baseline way to conceive of what might be where.
Right.
But I just picked up the book Tuning the Human Biofield by Eileen Day McCusick, and she has a second book called Electric Body, Electric Health. I read those books, bought some tuning forks, started messing around on some friends and family, and then started taking on, listeners to practice on them for a time. And then eventually I felt competent enough to offer it as a service, and my ability has expanded from there. But like I said, dude just picked up some forks recently and was able to create a lasting result for somebody who didn't even know about the method. So the belief factor wasn't necessarily there very strong, but it's doable. It's very possible.
So I was going to ask you that. Do you think, because I hear two schools of thought on this. Some people say it's like a frequency, like a mechanic, there's a mechanism and it's physical, it's physics somehow. And other people said, oh, the tuning forks and stuff are just belief aids. It's actually just the belief, the faith that you have, and these things help you believe it's happening. And so it's like a placebo effect. Is these? Do you think it is actually like there's something about the frequencies in the air propagating that are resonating with the body and causing healing, or do you think it is just this helps you believe something is happening, so it gets rid of that belief that's hurting you, and then your body heals that way?
Yes.
Both.
I'm totally a bothist about that question.
Okay.
I mean, the thing about especially medical, the science trademark, is they just will they'll discover something and they'll give it a name. And now we call it the placebo effect. And okay, we've got that figured out. But did we really figure that out, or did we just label it?
Naming is a very powerful thing. When you name something,
often just dismissive whenever
it's dismissive. It's a way to control things. It's a way to limit what you know about something and to put it in a box. It's a very I've been meditating on the idea of like naming and names for a while. I haven't reached any firm conclusions, but there's something very, like in exorcisms, they always say like, oh, if you figure out the demon's name, you can get rid of it. But until you do that, then you don't really have any control over it. It's very interesting.
That's another subject that might be fun to broach.
Yeah. Okay.
I think it's called like onomatology or something like that. It's a magic of names. But going back to that question of like, is it belief or is it something physical and concrete? And me saying it's both. Well, the belief factor is definitely powerful. I find that the results are better for people who have a general awareness of what biofield tuning is about and how it works. Because I think your body has an innate intelligence, and that the body's intelligence can cooperate with your conscious mind. And if your body knows what you're doing and why you're trying to do it, then it will help the process along. And that's a big factor. And also, like, with the forks being just kind of like a tool for your confidence and all that, I think that's true. You can even almost look at them like training wheels to a degree, because as I've progressed with doing biofield tuning, if I really wanted to, I could do a whole session just with my voice and my hands, that like I get the same cue in my body and like intuitive signals if I put my hand where the stuck energy is at versus if I put a fork there. So the forks they're a tool. I like them. Yeah. They're a fun aesthetic, but then on the other hand, there is a physical positive benefit to coherent sound. Well, my
Yeah.
favorite example to use to illustrate this is how, have you ever seen what happens when you put a bunch of metronomes in a room together and set them all off at different times?
Yeah, they all will sync up after a while.
Yeah. Why do you think that is?
Well, the conventional answer would be that there is that one beat. So the sound is the mechanical wave propagating through the air and compression and refraction, and so that is slowing down the ones that are faster and speeding and allowing the ones that are slower to make up time, and so eventually they all sync up. Is sort of how that's happening, but that happens
I like
on.
that. I've actually not heard of that described that way, but to me, that doesn't even rule out it as an example, honestly.
Yeah, no, I think the physical and the spirit, like I think the physical is a shadow of the spiritual, really. Like we use that all the time in language, like, oh, we had a lot of friction in our relationship or something. Like friction is a very physical term. It's things rubbing against each other, they're not gliding smoothly, but yet it makes total sense. And I think actually the spiritual relationship aspect comes first. And then what we see in the physical world is a reflection of that. Or like, I had a lot of energy, and then there's like physical energy, and like there's how you feel. There's momentum. Once you get in the habit, it's hard to break the habit. Once an object is in motion, it's hard to get it to stop moving. So I think that very much my background is in physics actually, which is why I always go to that. But um, I think that the physics is the most gross and not in an ugly way, but like large and less refined way of viewing spiritual realities is in the physical.
Yeah, that's brilliant. I would concur with that. The body is the shadow. When people say shadow work, it doesn't mean like just get dark. It means work on your somatic coherence,
Yeah.
improve your body health and the psyche. That's why I think we have a mind, body, spirit as a cooperative system. If one
Yeah.
area is stuck, then you can work on another area and get yourself unstuck in the first area. So, with the example of the metronomes, I think that the way you described it is actually so awesome. I'm going to like definitely put a post-it note in my mind about that for
Hmm.
future reference to bring that up, because I think that applies to how sound can work for the body as well. But the way I describe it is that whenever you have dissonance and coherence in the same space, then the dissonance trains itself to the coherence rather than the coherence getting dissonant.
Right. Yeah.
And like you just think of any time where people are kind of like, hanging out and they're maybe in the dumps, not in a good mood. There's, like you said, friction. And then that one person comes in who's an energy donor rather than an energy sucker. And all of a sudden everybody's like, yeah. And everyone's brought up to that level.
Yeah.
And, if everybody's dissonant and somebody has like intentional, coherent negativity, they can bring other people down to their level. So it can work that way. It can have coherence in sort of a bad intention way as well. I think we see that like in terms of conspiracy in the world, that's what the media is. There's a coherent negative messaging being put out that it makes the people who are not internally consistent easily entrained to that negative coherence. And then they all kind of lockstep together. Right.
Yeah.
So I think that that's how the physical aspect of sound can apply to helping the body, is that if the body has dissonance in its frequencies, because all of your organ systems, every aspect of your body has a energetic frequency to it. There's an oscillatory rate going on
Yeah.
the, your physics guy, you could probably tell me more about it than I could say, but that tuning forks, what makes them effective is that they are a coherent sound. And so I think that that's partially why like maybe 440 isn't such a healthy frequency, is
Hmm.
because a lot of the tones that are derived from 440 being the A note actually put you into like decimal fractional type of frequencies
Right.
rather than whole numbers. And that might
Hmm.
sound arbitrary or whatever, but when there's transcendental numbers in math, there's universal
Oh yeah.
constants and consistency. So I think that it's reasonable to assert that the reason why the 440 is such a dissonance type of tuning is because a lot of the notes that are coming out of it are actually not whole. They're not coherent. So
Yeah,
tuning forks, they are
correct.
coherent sound. Your body can entrain to that. So even without the knowledge of the biofield anatomy or the full skill set to do a proper overhaul on somebody's energy field, you can improve things. Like when I first started out, I just had a bad shoulder injury that wouldn't get better. I didn't really know much about this. I heard Eileen on a podcast and I thought, wow, I got like a strong internal signal, like, go look into this, do this. So I got one of her forks, and without any real knowledge of how it worked, I just started using it on the shoulder injury and it got better. And
Yeah.
then my life changed and I wound up divorced a few months later because that relationship was the actual root cause of the physical injury. Not to blame that relationship, but it was my posture in that relationship playing the role of the good guy versus the bad gal, the victimized empath versus the bullying vampire, that type of thing. I realized that I was in that role was why I was feeling this pain in my shoulder, was because I was accepting that as an identity. And I was doing it because, I hadn't quite realized that it was a victimhood posture. I had convinced myself that it was actually the heroic posture. I'm the good guy. I'm helping this person who needs help, who's like, emotionally disturbed and and all that. But no, at any point, whenever you're in that sort of dynamic, look at your life. If you feel like there's somebody that's kind of like a vampiric to you, are you actually getting some sort of currency out of your victimhood where you look at yourself as the good guy? And that's why that's what you feel like is the reason why you don't have a boundary with that relationship?
Yeah, like I was thinking when you were talking about like how you built up confidence to go back earlier with, and you said the tuning fork was like a on this show I relate things a lot back to the Bible, and you see that sort of in the life of Jesus when he starts out doing his miracles. He starts out using some sort of like aids in the earlier chapters, like he'll put mud on someone's eyes before he cures them of blindness. And then he does his most challenging ones, like reattaching an amputated body part in here, like right at the end, almost like he gets more confident in what he's doing as he goes on. And so he starts out with these like little aids and he's like, put the mud on or whatever.
I
And
never
then,
thought about it that way. That's cool. I like
yeah.
that.
And then toward the end, he's like, just, do it, and there's some, there's some, I mean, the whole thing, it's not a linear progression, because I would say like walking on water is pretty intense, even though that was sort of in the middle uh, of a miracle. But I do think like there's even if you're the most orthodox Christian, if you accept Jesus's humanity too, then there has to be some, because humanity involves progression. So there's like he would also have a sort of like confidence curve, maybe. I don't know, but that was an interesting idea. Like you get, as you get more confident, you need the tools less, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, I love that. I consider the New Testy to have all sorts of truth allegorized in it. And
Right.
that's definitely one. That's a great example that I'm going to hold on to that one too. So thank you for that. The progression aspect of his abilities.
Yeah, because like I think Christianity has emphasized his divinity to the point of diminishing his humanity. Like, because humanity involves certain things, and you can be like, well, I think people have it hard to square those two things. That is sort of the paradox of what's on offer in the story. Is like, how are these two squared? You got to figure that out. Um,
Yeah, I think the conflict really arises from trying to figure out what's the literal historical truth, as
mhm.
opposed to just taking it for the multi-layered allegory that it is, where all of a sudden there's way more value in it if you can take it allegorically, because now you can learn about nature, you can learn about the astrotheology aspect. There's many layers to it in the allegorical sense. But if as soon as you're like trying to hash out what the historical truth is there, now you have reason to fight with other people who have a different take. So that's where I sit with the Bible. I don't make any assertions about any historicity. In fact,
Hmm.
like I have lots of reason to think that it's not a historical text, but I actually think it's more beneficial to humanity as a story than as a history.
Mm-hmm. Um, what did okay, so in the you brought up astro, what did you say the word astro?
Astrotheology.
Yeah, astrotheology. Are you familiar with the Secret Sun?
Yeah, Chris
Secret Sun?
Knowles.
Yeah, Chris Knowles. What do you think about his stuff? Because some of it is very good, and then but he lays it out in such a way that I think that he's like 50% right, 20% schizo, and 30% experiencing pareidolia, where he's seeing faces that there aren't there. But that 50% that he's on about, he makes some really good points. Like NASA does do all of its stuff on ancient pagan holidays. And when I was like looking at that, I was like, that is very strange. When he first brought that to my attention, he's like, look at all their launches. Like this is on like the feast day of Jupiter. This is on the whatever of Venus. And I was like, and it's like every single time. That's very that was a very eye-opening revelation to me. And I've always kept him since he revealed that to me as like guy that probably knows something, even if I don't quite understand it.
So I can't speak to Knowles's work in any specifics. My
Uh,
familiarity with him is just enjoying him when he goes on my favorite podcasts over the many years
yeah,
that he's been making the circuit. Well, I've read a couple of his books too, so
yeah.
I like him.
What is it,
You know,
Great
and I'm
American Midnight?
you can't always you shouldn't agree with everything anybody thinks or says anyway.
Right.
Um, the so thing about pareidolia is I think that that's actually it's not something that's just made up. I think
I
that
don't either. I was gonna say, like, I
uh,
think like you're that's another way of naming something to dismiss it.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's
And
like
with
you see a face in a toast, like, well, maybe there is a face in this toast, Mr. Scientist. Maybe my toast has a face.
yeah, the dismissive aspect is how the materialist worldview refuses to accept that there's meaning in everything. That meaning
Hmm.
is the grounds of existence, not something that we just create and invent. I mean, yeah, we can make up meanings that maybe other people don't see, or that there's not any actual like conclusive observable reality to. But where the meaning is most meaningful is the self-evident self-evident truth. Like what helped for me in life was a big step up for my life was when I started interpreting the experiences I was having as if I was doing a dream interpretation, and it
Hmm.
actually
Hmm.
applied that like, oh, okay, so my life is my psyche externalized, and every experience that's coming to me is something from my inner world seeking some kind of resolution or providing me with the benefit of how that inner world configuration is harmonious. And so when
Hmm.
you brought up like NASA doing everything that they do on pagan holidays, the thing is that I mean my personal perspective is that there's a priest class behind the scenes of society, and
Yes.
they're
And they're
super
connected to the stars as the priest cast always is. The
yeah,
priest cast is always connected to the reading of the stars
yes,
from
and
time
the
immemorial. Yeah.
like if you go all the way back to ancient Sumeria, the priests of the Sumerian Babylonian time period, they did this practice called lumashi, which
Yep.
is, you know about this?
I've heard refresh
Okay, cool.
because
So
I could have brought up the word Lumashi from my depths, but I couldn't have told you what it was.
I got this term from my friend John McHugh, who's
Hmm.
he researches like petroglyphs, and he's like his two prongs are like Native American petroglyphs and Middle East linguistics. So pretty
Right.
interesting divergences. Like he's a cuneiform expert, which I
Right.
find a lot of value in that, even though I'm not actually sold that cuneiform, the artifacts are as old as we're told. I think
Hmm.
they might
Hmm.
not be. But that aside, the idea of Lumashi involves so okay, you know about astrotheology, right? That the
Yes.
all of the scriptures, all of the mythologies are contained in the relationships between stars and constellations, and that those stories derive from that. Well, how that happens is back in the day, the BC days, and probably for a long time after, like I think the Greeks continued this practice, the Romans continued this practice. I think it even still continues today somehow, some way, but maybe that the stars are more like Hollywood movies rather than the actual sky above. And what would happen is like, okay, so we have examples of mythological characters or stories where there's a bunch of different examples of the same character or different
Hmm.
versions of the same story. And
Right.
how does that happen? How do we get a bunch of divergent
Like
examples? Like even look at
Hercules and Saint Michael, very similar sort of archetype.
yeah,
Yeah.
totally. Exactly. I mean, even in the Bible, right?
Right.
How how many times is Jesus born in the Bible?
Well, his birth is covered in the Gospels
Of Luke and of
twice,
Matthew.
right? Luke and Matthew, and Mark skips it, and John skips it.
Right.
But
So why did Luke and Matthew have two different stories for the birth of Jesus, where there's
right, because
details, some details are
Luke
the
goes
same and
through
some
the
details are totally different?
yeah, Luke goes. If I don't have him cross, Luke starts with the wise men coming from the east, and Matthew does not talk about the wise men and talks about the shepherds mostly.
I couldn't, without my notes in front of me, I couldn't tell you all the differences exactly, but the fact that there are two different accounts should raise a flag of like, okay, maybe there's maybe this isn't a history we're reading. And okay, so what the ancient priest class would do is they would have the names of the constellations, they'd have the names of the stars, they're all mapped out. And then they would look at puns that exist. So, like, a big secret to the priestcraft is the punniness of it all.
Hmm.
So, how a word might inside a word encode multiple other words, or if you like break it apart, it's called the green language or the language of the birds or language of the bards, where you,
Yep.
instead of
Yep.
just taking on the intended culturally accepted left brain definition, you're also looking at a word or phrase through your right brain, through your creativity to see like, well, what else is encoded in there? Like when we say today's Saturday, it's the weekend. Well, why are we saying that we're getting the week end of the deal? You know,
Yeah.
it's like
Or
this
days of
empower.
the week. Days of the
Yeah,
week can also be like days, DAZ, of the WEAK, the days of
exactly.
the week. Like because the week or the slaves are stuck in the circle of the weekday working cycle, like the 9 to 5. So it's the days of the week, and then so you can see that it's like English is a very sort of uh, magical, crafted language.
It is 100% a magical
Yeah.
language. Yeah. And a lot of people will take that as like the example we just gave and be like, well, English is a slave language, obviously meant to weaken you. But I think it's a highly magical language that is very empowering, but you just have to know that you have to know how to draw from the depths below the surface, right? Some people get kind of crazy with it. Like they'll, instead of saying weekend, they'll be like, it's the strong front. And
Yeah, yeah.
and
My
they'll
my
reimagine a bunch of
understanding.
words and exactly like instead of the
Yeah.
morning, like a morning period, it's the rising. And I'm all for that. I just can't personally communicate with people very well when I start doing that too much.
I'm
So
for it too. I just don't have the personal tenacity to keep that up and like
yeah,
check myself
exactly.
every day and say, Ugh. Yeah, I
When
don't
you
have
say
the
morning, you're
energy
like, fuck, I didn't mean to say morning.
I meant to say rising. I meant to say, yeah,
Yeah, it can get a
I
little
can't,
exhausting. And
I can't.
I think it's really the psychic self defense is the symbolic literacy. You don't have to
Yes.
necessarily correct yourself all the time. You're not hurting yourself. Intention always energetically trumps the multi-layered potential other meanings. But
Mhm.
that being said, like the synchromysticism that Chris Knowles is into is very much derived out of this idea of the green language and seeing the other potential meanings that are hidden within the overt, seemingly intended meaning. And the idea of Lumashi, the scripture in the stars, star writing is what Lumashi means literally. The ancient priests would look at the constellations, they would look at the possible puns in the relationship between the words, and they would derive a story out of whatever they're seeing in the current stellar tableau, what was visible in the night sky at that moment. And, with this is the type of thing I like to go into in detail and show specific examples of in episodes of my show where I have, the notes prepared and the ability to dig into it very, very deeply. But
Right.
the fact is that the system, its evolution is derived out of how over time languages change. And so the puns encoded their change, or the priests might be taken over by a different empire and a new language is introduced into their society. They're multilingual. So they're now adding a new layer of possible meanings that they get encoded on top of it by, the puns that are derivable out of the next language that's introduced. And this wordplay system is how mythology advanced and evolved over time, 100%. And I think it's where a lot of our so-called ancient history comes from, that when a
Right.
new king or empire takes over, the first thing they do is they take the priest class hostage, and the priest class being also the astronomers of the day. I mean, even Homer, familiar with Homer, the
Yes.
famous Greek poet. Homer means hostage. It's not
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
guy's name. He's a hostage. And the new come in and kick out the old boss. They want to establish their divine right of kingship. So what they do is they would employ to come up with a history of our people, our empire, our family lineage, what have you, that traces us all the way back to the beginning, back to the Adam or Noah or whoever the mythologically accepted progenitor of humanity was for that culture. And
Yeah.
then we move on into, the history progresses and we have these histories of empires and rulers and whatnot that are complete astrotheology. But that's what we're actually basing our knowledge of history on, as if that was a literal story that truly happened. But most of it is for sure at least allegory to astrotheology, or a euheremism where you apply mythological traits to a historical character. So many of the emperors and kings of, the ancient Roman Empire or Alexander the Great or what have you, all share in their mythos the born of a virgin, names relating to the sun, et cetera, and it goes on and on.
Well, so two things. One, I try to impress upon people that like the biblical angels are the stars. They're the same thing. Like the heavenly host, like they are. And what that
Yeah,
means
Yahweh
exactly.
Sabaoth. The Sabaoth means host. Yahweh Sabaoth is the Lord of the host. Well, who's the host?
Right.
Is the host of the stars.
They're
Exactly.
the heavenly army, that's the stars in the sky. And somehow the idea was that those stars that you see every night are conscious beings that occasionally can manifest in forms that you can see more locally here on earth. Maybe as one of those quote unquote biblically accurate angels with all the wings and eyes, maybe as someone in the form of a man, but they would come down and they could have a localized presence, even though they are the star. And that was the idea, was that the stars are conscious, which is sort of, and if you think about it, stars have all of the attributes of living beings. They have metabolism, they burn, they take in fuel, they burn it, they reproduce, stars make other stars. This is all just main science stuff. The stars have a means of splitting and reproducing. Um, the stars take it. I mean, like all of the like hallmarks of life you could apply to a star in
But
a
have
way.
you ever thought about how interesting it is that the same constellations in their exact configuration and spacing star to star from each other of 2,000, 3,000 years ago are exactly the way the stars look now?
Oh yeah, yeah, with the
So
Earth
that
isn't moving. I don't know.
that
I don't know the shape of
birth
the
of
Earth.
other stars and their
Yeah,
yeah, to me that rules out the scientific materialist consensus cosmology. I'm not saying I know what the universe is or what the earth is, but at this point I have zero belief in what we've been told it is. I mean, have you looked at like the stars zoomed in on a camera before, and like the
Yeah.
wobbly
There's weird
cymatic
pulsing.
pattern
And
oscillations that they do?
in fact, my where I grew up had a lot of, I don't know. If you looked in the sky, you would see things sometimes. I wrote a post about that on my Substack once a while ago, but my dad has a great video he took. He was just out one night walking the dog, and it looks like a star has come down close and is moving around, and it's like pulsating, and then it just goes back away. I don't know what it is, but it's something strange. My dad said he believed it was an angel. I don't know, maybe, but I don't know what the shape of the Earth is, but it's definitely not moving. It's as still as can be.
Yeah.
It couldn't possibly be doing all these loop de loops and going round and spiraling around the sun in a million bazillion.
And then
And then
the
you sit
sun
a
is
glass of
moving
water.
around the galactic center, but yet
Yeah,
all the stars are exactly where they were thousands of years ago.
yeah. And then you set a
Yeah,
glass of
okay.
water on a table and it doesn't move at all. It's like this ridiculous. I don't know what but that is a ridiculous idea. And people are like, "Oh no." It's like, "No, that's stupid." Like it's of course it's not moving. It's as still as anything is ever going to be.
Don't take away my fantasy Star Wars future that I'll never actually get to experience.
I know everyone's like, you're not going to Mars. You can't go to Mars. Mars probably isn't a physical place that you could stand on. It's probably, I don't know what it is. I've
It's
looked
not
through
a
a
so this
telescope
isn't a claim. This isn't a claim, but I like to imagine that beyond Antarctica, if the ice wall is really what Antarctica is, that the circumference of the world that we get on our map.
Yeah.
I like the idea. I mean, feel free, anybody out there, to find a way to disprove this to me. I'll be like, okay, fine, but it's still a fun idea that beyond Antarctica are extra lands, that's where the extraterrestrials come from,
Mhm.
that the
Because extraterrestrial just means more land. Extra more terrestrial Earth.
yeah, exactly. And I think what I think is fun to imagine is that Mars and Venus could be the sun and the moon of the further out land.
Yeah,
And that
interesting.
further ring from there, maybe Saturn and Jupiter are the sun and moon, possibly.
Mm,
I mean, we
yeah.
know actually that Venus has an occultation cycle that resembles the phases of the moon. Like, why?
Yes.
Why is that?
You're right. Right.
And so maybe when they're like, okay, we're going to Mars, maybe they're going to the land outside of our current land.
Interesting. Interesting idea. I don't know. Like I said, I tell people I don't know what the shape is, but it's definitely not moving. It's like that's preposterous.
That's where I'm at
It's
too. I don't need to have any claims about it. I'm happy to not
I
know the
I will
mysteries.
claim it still. People are like, like if it was not still, so many things would not work. You would. It's not. It's crazy to have all these
I'm
different
with you on the still. Yeah, stillness makes perfect sense.
these motions. You got polar coordinate motion. You got spinning. You got X, Y, and Z. You got up, down, and you don't feel any of it ever. That's crazy. That's a crazy. That would just be. But But anyway, but my other point was, so that what is the angels are the stars, the same. And then the English is like the mixed
Angles,
martial arts of,
angel, angle.
yeah, English,
It's
and they
all
tell
about
you
the
this,
angles the stars are making at the current moment that gives you the ability to cast a horoscope or whatever.
yeah, like, and and they even tell you this, like in the lore, like the word English, uh when, like, what people say is that when the Romans came, they took the English slaves. They were in slave markets, but all the children were so beautiful they didn't describe them as English, but as angels. I don't know if that's true or if that's just a nod to the intrinsic, like they're like, oh, these words are the same, wink, wink. Um,
Hmm.
and like so English, because English is the most advanced language by far that we have, the most advanced, and people get upset about that and think it's like what chauvinism and like, oh, you're being racist. Just objectively, it has the most words. It has, it's got the Germanic in it, it's got the French, it's got the Latin. It now has a lot of Native American words in it. Like it's like the mixed martial arts of languages. It took in all these different languages and made it in this giant thing. And because you've got those 2 or 3 different registers, you can really say some interesting things just in a practical way. Because you can say anything in like, oh, you can say the Germanic, the ghost, the Holy Ghost, or you can switch over to the Latin and be like the Holy Spirit, the Spiritus. Sort of the same thing, 2 different inflections. So you've got all these different registers you can operate in, and it is the most like sort of magical crafting language that there is. I don't know if I buy into this conspiracy that that was done by like whoever pretended to be Shakespeare or whatever. But some people say, "Oh, this was manufactured by people pretending to be Shakespeare." Like, I don't go that far, but there's definitely something very interesting about English, which is why it takes over the world. It's like the most. It's not simply that the English had an empire. It's a very interesting language
Yeah,
for
I really like, are you familiar with Marty Leeds?
no.
Oh, he's great. You might maybe you want to talk to him sometime. Yeah. He's
Does
a
he have a
buddy of
show?
mine. Yeah, he does. So his
Okay.
channel is the Gnostic Academy.
Okay. Marty Leeds
And
Gnostic
so
Academy.
it's not your typical like truther pop culture simulation theory bullshit Gnosticism. Everything's just, there's all a luge prison and the
Right.
archons and demiurge and all that stuff. It's not gnosis as in what we can actually know about this place that is self-evident truth. And Marty is a big gematria guy. He's a big math guy. And
Mhm.
that's where he kind of cut his teeth in the content creation space, which he's been in for like a decade now. So he's a total pro. He just moved to my area. So pretty excited about that. We get to hang out.
Where is your area? If
I'm
you
in
don't want to.
Southwest Missouri.
Oh, Missouri. Missouri. You're over there by Topher.
Yep. Him
Topher.
and Marty are very close to each other, and they're both about an hour from me.
I've been trying to get Topher to come on the show, and he said he would. And then you email him, and he doesn't respond, which is fine. I think he just takes a while to respond.
Keep trying. He's a slippery bastard. I'm
He
sure he's
is.
down. I'm sure
Yeah,
he's
yeah,
down to do it.
yeah.
After he sees how much fun we had, he'll want to come on.
Oh yeah, for sure. And I want him. I want him to build a. I want him to build me a dome. Maybe. I want to know how much it costs first, because it sounds like it might be. But his like dome architecture, I'm very interested in. Uh, I've always
So
wanted one of those dome houses, like a little. I've always thought those were really cool, like made out of dirt or earth.
yeah, he's total legend in that space, and then a bunch of
Yeah,
other expertises. But back
like
to why
if I could have like 5 domes connected by earth tunnels, that'd be awesome. I
so
don't think I could. I don't think I could afford to pay him what he would ask for, but
so why I brought up Marty though is
uh
he's really good at demonstrating gematria in a way that is not full schizo like most gematria is.
yeah, like, oh, this had 7 in it. That means that it sounds like 11, which is where the gas station is, which has the Keebler cookies in it, which means there's elves, and the elves come from Ireland, and then
And
that
L
that sort
starts
of
with L like 11.
yeah. So therefore, President Bush's wife was a woman, a man. She's a woman man.
Definitely.
Right.
That's a
That's how that
man, baby.
that's how that stuff sometimes goes.
Well, one of the things I've learned from him, and we did a recent episode all about pi, the transcendental universal constant that is pi.
Yep.
Fascinating subject, endless gravy in that. The way of a way is to do 7 divided by 22.
I'm
Or
sorry.
I'm
Say that
sorry,
again.
22 divided by 7. I got that back to front. So pi
22
is
divided by 7.
3.14, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it goes on infinitely. And 22 divided by 7 gives you 3.14, and then repeating decimal. And beyond the 3.14, it's not the same as like true pi if you were to calculate it using the circumference of a circle and its radius, but it's the closest you can get with whole numbers and just doing a division like that. And the septenary cipher that Marty has put forward, which is it's A is 1, B is 2, and it goes up like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then again the other way.
Mm-hmm.
That's like attaching a number to each letter of the alphabet. So in that system, which is what the Bible, the English King James version of the Bible, is encoded with, all over, riddled with septenary cipher mysteries. The number 7, if you type it out, if you write out the number 7 and you add up the value of all of those letters,
like SEVEN.
yeah, and you add up the value of 7 in gematria, the gematria value of 7 is 22. So it's like baked into our language, whether mystically and divinely or intentionally by crafters of the language from the priest class, probably a little of both. But I tend to think that it's more on the divine side because there's too much of it to be able to wrap your head around for, to control.
At some point it gets too much where it's like a person couldn't have come up with this,
Exactly. Which is why I think that the Logos is, that's why they call Christ the Logos, in my opinion, because
the Word made flesh.
Yeah, and God created the universe from numbers and letters. I think that once you get into the mystical studies like gematria and you see how replete everything is encoding these transcendentals and these like laws of nature through the math in the words we speak, it becomes obvious that there's something that's trying to wink, wink, nudge, nudge at us through our expression, that it's something inside of us that is always there, always present, and always speaking to us. And it becomes up to us to start paying attention, like, well, what are you trying to tell me? And gematria is a good way to start to see that as a truth.
Yeah. And people, as much as it's not visible, Westerners are still very much like Western academics is still very much in the realm of numerology and sort of gematria, but you just only find it in the field of mathematics, which no one looks at. Like physicists and so on they don't really do it. But if you talk to mathematicians, you're like, why are you doing this weird thing with math? And they're like, but look at this pattern. Like, but what is that for? It's like, I don't know, but look at this pattern. And they just like get really into just finding, like, have you ever looked at a graph of the prime numbers plotted like on polar coordinates? You would think, like,
can I Google it?
I think so. You would think that like it would just be random, but actually the prime numbers on a polar coordinates form a spiral shape out to infinity. And so there's like structure even to this apparently random, like this, well, I don't guess but this apparently non-predictable pattern of like where it's, because you can't predict the next prime number. You just sort of have to test them. At least we can't yet. And so, but yet there is some underlying structure there beyond our ability to see. And they do this stuff with they'll like assign numbers to, this is one of the criticisms people make of someone like Kurt Gödel. I can never pronounce his name. It's either Gödel or Gödel.
Yeah.
With his incompleteness theorem. And he'll be like, but he just arbitrarily defined everything in his system. It's like, and it is sort of like crazy, but that's what mathematicians, they make up new value systems and numbers and they like play with them. They're totally still in this whole like gematria, finding patterns in numbers, finding deeper meanings in numbers thing. That's all math, that they just have to justify it to the people paying them money by pretending that one day it'll have an application to computers or something. They say, oh yeah, well, this is because it's Boolean logic. And they'll go, oh, okay, here's here's $10,000, keep going. And they get back with the graph paper. But that spirit is still there in Western, thankfully, in Western academia. If it wasn't for mathematics, Western academia would be almost irredeemable. But we're still doing interesting things.
There's such a range of what is called math. How much you studied physics, how much of what is taken for gospel in the world of mainstream science is based on abstract, complicated algebraic calculus with no grounding in reality, where you're looking at models, simulating through models, and calling what that model spits out some kind of scientific discovery.
A good bit. I mean, it's hard to
especially
say.
Astrophysics.
It's hard to put a number on it, but it's a good bit. One of the favorites, I've told this story on the show before, but one of my favorite stories from school was my professor. We were attending this lecture, and this guy was up there, and he was showing all these results. And he was an old school guy. He was very experimental. You know, people fall into two camps: theoretical or experimental physicists. And he was deeply into experimental. He almost did no theory. And after the lecture, he stood up and says, "But where is your experiment?" And the guy answered with this thing. He says, "Yeah, but that's a computer model." And he's like, "Well, this is what we did." He's like, "Oh, so you didn't do an experiment? It's on a computer. It's just math." He said, "Just math. Where's your experiment?" And dismissed the whole thing. You know, then there is still a beating heart within Western academia that is useful. It's just really being attacked. But there are still people, and I think you find the heart of it in mathematics, where they still just you talk to a mathematician. I was in this class on duality. It was mathematical duality, and the professor, he was up there. He would do this thing, and then he would just pause and stare at the blackboard for like 5 minutes, like just in silence. And then he would turn and say, "Isn't that beautiful?" You know, he just say, "Isn't that beautiful?" Like, look at this pattern, you know? So that's still there. And people are still sort of like with pi, you know, there's like Euler's identity where like e to the I pi plus one is zero, which is sort of a crazy truth that you take the three like constants everybody knows, like e and I and pi, and you put them together and they form one. It's like it comes out to unity, which is crazy. But it's
I have
true.
not heard of that one.
Yeah, e to the I pi is minus one, and so it's like so if you add one to it, it's zero. You know, so the three main like constants in mathematics, you put them together, you get one, which is pretty interesting. And people are like, "Oh, well, it's just because of this." Yeah, it is, but it's also like, isn't it interesting that it worked out that way? You know, who put that together? Very strange. But so that's still there. It's still going. And
That's probably
I
what keeps a lot of mathematicians interested, is that they see the divine harmony in it. And maybe they're afraid to call it as such in open forums because the rest of their colleagues at the university will maybe laugh them down or scoff at it. But back
oh yeah,
to tie everything back to,
yeah,
you brought up Gödel's
yeah,
incompleteness
Godell's.
theorem,
Yeah. However you
which
pronounce his
is
name. I've heard it said so many ways. I don't know what it is.
Gödel.
Godel. Godel, Girdle. I've said I don't know.
We'll
We'll
go
call
with
him Godel.
Gödel. We'll just go
Yeah,
with that.
Godel.
Incompleteness theorem is that anything that is encircled, any point or information that is within a circle can only be defined in relation to something outside of the circle.
Yes.
Right? I got that right? Okay. So
Yeah, pretty much.
to tie that into the rest of the conversation and the earth not being a spinning ball flying through the endless vacuum with no meaning in a giant empty void, the meaning that we derive in life, you know, you were saying the stars are angels, or
Right.
you could even like, I would even go so far as to say maybe we don't need to, I don't know, right? But maybe we don't need to consider the energies of the stars coming and manifesting as human beings and like stars incarnating as humans, but instead that they represent the full swath of archetypes that exist within the psyche or the mind of God. And so they do incarnate as humans, but they all have play mixed and matched within each and every person, which is evident in the astrology chart of somebody's birth. So if the system that is encircled, which is our realm, you know, the firmament, the dome, whatever, even on a globe, you could look at it this way. If it can only be defined by that which is outside of it, well, then that necessitates the idea of God, but also it shows you it's an example of how, mathematically speaking, there's a good reason to assert that our meaning can be like meaning here on this earth is understandable through the context, or maybe only fully understandable through the context of that which is outside of it, the stars
Yeah.
and the sky above.
Which is why religion is always concerned about heaven. Like people have spiritualized the idea of heaven to the point of meaninglessness. Like it's some
Yeah,
vague, like
abstractified it.
heaven is the sky. It's the same, it's just different words for the same thing. It is the sky. Like the heavens above is the sky.
Yeah,
You
they
know?
make fun of the term. They're like, "Oh, you believe in the Sky Father?"
Like, yes, I do. I believe in I believe in a man in the sky. Yeah.
Well, lots of ancient religious systems or mythologies, the name of the god, the top god, top G, was a word that also meant sky or heaven at the same
Right.
time,
Yeah.
like
Like Zeus,
Uranus.
once upon a time, there's some evidence that Zeus just meant the sky, like the sky above, the Zeus above. I don't know what the Greek would be, but
Well, it's the you pater, pater
yeah,
is pattern
yeah,
and father.
the sky father.
The,
Yeah.
the Etruscans who predate the Italian civilization and the whole idea of like Zeus and Jupiter, their name for that divinity was Teen or Tenia, which first
Mm,
of all encodes the idea of 10.
yep.
Interesting enough, lots to do with the X or the 10, the cross that is replete throughout the universal mythology systems. But the what's interesting to me about Tenia or 10, another fun sync with that is in alchemy, Jupiter is associated with the metal 10. Funnily
Mm,
enough, the Chinese have a sky father as well in some
yeah.
of their oldest tradition called Tien.
Yep.
So right there you have and that name basically means heaven. It's
Right.
the whole heavens is their main god. So you have Tien and Teen or 10 in two very different parts of the world, but in similar ages of time. To me, that suggests an obvious link between the cultures. The Egyptians have, and then you also get a lot of mileage out of looking at things right to left that are normally read left to right and vice
Mm,
versa, because the Etruscans actually did write from right to left.
right.
So if you were looking at the name Teen, you might read it as neat or net. The Egyptians have this exact deity. It's a goddess whose purview is wisdom called Neith or Neith or Net.
Mm,
And it's probably the root of the Neter, which is the name for nature or all the gods in combination. So Neith backwards is Tien from China. There's a
which is
very
and a net catches all of them. It's a net because it's like it catches all. It's like it has all of them encompassed
exactly.
in the net.
Yeah, if you
Yeah. Like
linked all the stars together with lines, it would look like a big net in the sky. The Hindus
mhm.
have the idea of the net of Indra. Who is Indra? Indra is a sky father, lightning,
Right.
whirlwind deity. It goes
Yeah.
on
You
and
basically
on.
get a sky father and an earth mother, and that's religion in like the most basic format. Like sky father, earth, and there's a reason for that, which is that the feminine has to be material. One, because of the etymology, like matter is the same as mother, mater, mother, but also because spirit is breath, spiritus, like inspiration, expiration, and spirit impregnates matter, and that's what makes it alive. Because when you breathe in, spirit goes into the matter, and that is what. And when matter does not have spirit impregnating it, it is not alive. It's dead. And so the spirit is masculine, and the matter is feminine, just based on that. And that's why there's the sky. That's why there's our Father in heaven has to be a masculine, and that it doesn't make sense otherwise.
Yeah, you nailed it. But
Yeah.
also, when you collapse them down, you find that it's really one being that is androgynous. The mother is the father. I
Mm.
I went and saw. I just wanted to know what they're putting in there. Whenever you're aware of the universal mystery wisdom tradition,
Mm-hmm.
like the keys of it, the touchstones of that system, you'll find that all of Hollywood pretty much is actually repeating that system over and over again in allegories dressed up in modern or fantastical aesthetics. So I saw the movie The Creator,
Mm-hmm.
which just came out, humongous, obvious Gnostic allegory. But even in that movie, mild spoiler, I don't care though. You probably won't see it or people won't see it. But there's like a character that's the father or the maker, and
Mm-hmm.
then there's the character that's supposed to be his daughter, and then you
Mm-hmm.
find out that like the daughter is actually the maker or the father. So they like the exact thing that I was just describing shows up in that movie. How The secret was that the mother is the father, is, and the child all at once. That's the idea of the Trinity and this doctrine that goes on and on. Like the name of Yahweh is a good example of this. You have if the 4-letter tetragrammaton name of God, Yad He Vav He, that gets transliterated into English modernly as the name Jehovah. But if you transliterate those Hebrew letters differently, which you can, each of those letters could potentially be more than one possible English letter, depending on what you decide to pick and choose. The name of God becomes IeuE, like you, or JeuE, like Jew. So there's the U Pater or the Jew Pater. It's actually the same name as the Tetragrammaton. You have also the possibility of that Vav, instead of being a U, it can be a V, obviously. So the 4-letter name of God, instead of Jehovah, could be transliterated as Eve, Ieve. Eve in Hebrew means life. In like the Nag Hammadi creation story, the Gnostic texts of the Nag Hammadi, that's actually specifically stated where Eve says that she is her own father and she is her own son, and et cetera, et cetera. Because that's actually like the secret in the doctrine that it all resolves down to the mother, father, and child, all of the characters in the mythos. And then those 3 resolve down into being actually one being, which is most perfectly represented by the sun, because the sun goes through that phase of creating, destroying, regenerating, or preserving it throughout the year. That's the microcosm. So I think that the best way to consider astrotheology, astrology, mythology is that it's one being going through different costumes. It's like the sun is an actor changing roles as it goes through different parts of the zodiac or parts of the year. And the entirety of the sky and all the constellations and everything they represent are the psychodrama of the inner world, or the psyche of the pleroma, or all that is and exists, which is the imagination of God or the creator. So it's one being, the sky father. The whole sky is the father. But within that being, just like you have multiple possible expressions of yourself, depending on what situation you're in, you might wear a different mask with metaphorically with a different group of people than you would with another group of people. That's how it works up in the sky as well. There's one being that is transforming itself continually as it progresses through the story or through the spiral of time.
Fascinating. Well, we've been about an hour and a half, which is a good time.
It was
thank you for coming. Thank you for coming on. I enjoyed it. Our listeners to this show said you got to get Chance on, and I said okay. And then I asked Tanny to do it, to email you, because I can't schedule anything of my own. I've tried before. I'm not a business person. I don't know how to do business. I just ask other people to do business for me. But hopefully we'll have you. This is for people. I'm going to give you this recording if you want to put it out on yours. That's great.
Totally do. Yeah, I would love to. Thank you.
Yeah, this is the Mystical American Patriots Society podcast. And hopefully we're going to have you on and other people on in the future more. We're just now getting into we were just doing our own thing for a long time, sort of adjacent, having no guests on, just me basically ranting for 2 hours. You
got the steam for it. It's a good time.
Yeah. So everyone, give me money, give Chance money, find our Patreons or whatever. Do you have anything like that?
Got a Patreon and I got a Rockfin.
Okay, we're gonna put all your links in the thing. Click on them both. Give everyone money, and everyone have a good day. We love you all.
Awesome.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, man. People can just find me by searching InnerVerse podcast.
InnerVerse podcast. I need to say that. I'm so bad at that. InnerVerse podcast. InnerVerse podcast with Chance Garton. Everybody.
That's what to do.
Everybody go. All right. Well, thank you, sir, so much. I'll have this recording sent to you by my people.
Thank you, your people, and thank you for having me on. Have a good time.
Yeah, I had a good time too. Thank you, sir.